Hi there everyone, I'm Ryan Bierman, and this is part 2 of my presentation along with Penelope on the prevalence of syphilis among African American men in the US during the time period of 1990 to 2000. Alright everyone, just to start off with our first section here is on host factors, or how many humans are affected in the US. And what we've noticed is that in the 90s throughout the 2000 period, is that the most predictive factors for an individual or someone in the 90s to have syphilis is just being African American and being from the South. And so what we noticed with black men in that time period, their rates per 100,000 went from 69 all the way up to 156, which as shown is a 126% increase. While black women had it even worse, at also a rate of per 100,000 people, their rates went from 35 all the way up to 116, which is a 231% increase. And lastly, as you can see on this graph here on the right side of the screen, that a vast majority of syphilis cases from this time came from men who have sex with men in the South, while just the rest of it just came from men who have sex with women, or there's no data on it, or just from women. And we'll take a look at this on where it affects people, specifically in the US, like what regions, on the next slide here. Alright everyone, as previously mentioned in the last slide, that syphilis is a big issue in the South is true, as you can see if you look at the data on the graph below. Just essentially that there's a lot of issues that contribute to the increase in syphilis, and for environmental factors, we believe that one of the biggest issues, or if not the biggest issue, is geographical location. So in this time period of the 1990s to the 2000s, the South had a massive issue of syphilis, and that was, as I also stated, that it was largely in part of the African American community, and they didn't know how to stop it or prevent it due to the lack of knowledge. And we'll also discuss this more in the next slide of temporal variation. Okay, now just to start off for temporal variation, it was, like I said for the last slide, it was just really important to note that a vast majority of the cases of syphilis in the United States at that time period, in the 1990s to 2000s, occurred in the South. And at that time in the 1990s, it was an epidemic in the US, meaning that this issue reached high levels across the entire country, not just one region. However, the issue of syphilis was still an endemic to the South. An endemic is just a very local issue to like one region per se, and it was a very local issue to the South. And another large reason for this was at the time period there was very limited healthcare for African Americans, especially in the South. And the last time there was like a big peak like this in the US was during the 1940s. And this was also in part due to gaps in knowledge, which we'll describe in the next slide here. Alright, just taking a look at the gaps in knowledge issue. Currently now, at 2018, there are ways to screen for syphilis, to cure it, and to prevent it. And during that time in the South, a lot of these African American people did not understand that there are ways to screen for it or cure it just because, like I said, of the lack of knowledge. Now just the real issue now is just preventing individuals from just acquiring syphilis in the first place. So like the lack of knowledge about, let's say, acquiring syphilis, again, is just one of the main reasons why people have it. And the people who needed the information on how to treat syphilis, like let's say to wear a condom or to get screened for syphilis, they just weren't receiving it at that time, which is why there's just that such massive rise in syphilis, just endemic in the South. So, we would like further epidemiological research for syphilis. You know, as previously stated, it is now curable, it is preventable, and people know how to treat it. But that's not the issue we necessarily need it for. The next step, because we need the next step that we would need is to be able to spread awareness of the syphilis issue and to avoid people even acquiring syphilis in the first place, as that would save us as a whole in the United States time and money of treating it and trying to find out if someone has it or not. And also because, like, typically when someone acquires syphilis, it starts off not so bad for someone, but the longer and longer it stays inside of someone without being treated, the deadlier it becomes for someone. And it's really vital for someone to be able to research ways in order to keep people, just individuals, healthy while they're awaiting vaccination and while they're awaiting treatment. And that would just be something we would really need as a country to do a lot more research on. Last but not least, we need your help. We need $100 million in order to help the world become a better place and cure it from syphilis once and for all. Now, as I've said, it has a cure. People can fix it. This isn't AIDS. This isn't cancer. It's not as deadly. It's not killing as many people. And those are important facts to know, because it's not the worst. It's not the worst disease out there. It's not. But on the other hand, if you give us this $100 million, we can end syphilis. It already has a cure. We can just totally raise awareness for this. Make sure everyone knows about it. Make sure everyone is taking treatments for it, getting vaccinated. And if we do this properly, with your help of course, then we can end syphilis just once and for all. Syphilis will become the new smallpox. It will be eradicated. And that is one massive disease left not to worry about now. Just completely gone. And we need your help. Please think it over, and thank you.